Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome my friend Bruno Bertini to the podcast. Welcome, Bruno.
Thanks for having me, Callie.
Of course. If folks don't know, Bruno is the Chief Marketing Officer at 8x8, where he's responsible for developing and driving the company's overall global marketing strategy. His goal is to, like all of us, to drive consistent growth, to lead market presence, and to help accelerate the company forward. Bruno is a recognized technology growth marketer, over 15 years of experience in both customer experience and the contact center space. So we're super thrilled to have him talking to him today about all kinds of things, maybe some career advice, maybe some history and how customer experience makes you a better marketer. So we'll just lean in there. So welcome to the podcast, Bruno.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for the sweet and kind intro. Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, anytime. So Bruno and I met, I think about a year and a half ago. He was brand new at 8x8 and I was brand new at Demandbase. He's one of the first CMO to CMO calls I did, one of our first prospects. And we just connected. And I really have enjoyed getting to know him over that time, just as we're both kind of growing things. He's in a public company. I'm in a private. We have different challenges, but essentially they're all kind of the same. So I'm excited to dive into some of that today.
Sounds good. I appreciate the partnership and the advice along the way as well.
Yeah, same for me. Very cool. Okay, so tell us about your career journey, just maybe in 3 or 4 sentences, kind of a high level of how you got to where you are right now.
So if I were to give like an elevator pitch, very high level, I've started as a CX consultant. I moved into tech sales and I found my home in marketing. Why I kind of love marketing? Because it puts all of those together. So if you think about it, I've been a buyer, I've been a seller, and now I have the privilege to be the kind of the storyteller of them. So it's really kind of how do we put all of those together to reignite brands? That's kind of why my biggest passion. And that's what landed me in marketing. And of course, inside marketing, a lot of different areas from growth, leading regions, and things like that. More than 3 sentences? I don't know. ChatGPT, can you count the sentences, please, and let us know?
Well, I think the interesting part there is you sort of think is like, if I'm going to be a CMO one day, I probably need to check all the boxes in marketing functional acumen. I need to do digital and I need to do positioning and I need to do brand and I need to do, paid or whatever it is. The reality is understanding your customers, what that, I guess, sales experience, you mentioned technical sales, that's such a different perspective than you usually have coming into a marketing. How did you make that pivot? How did you get to?
It's interesting because what I heard along the way was, you are crazy. Why are you doing this? You're throwing everything away. You became this really good consultant. You're going to start over. And I'm like, yeah, I'm super excited to sell. And then all the way along. So if you think about it, when I was a consultant, I understood the buyer and why they were doing that. Like it's the tech, but how that fits into their business, that other 95% beyond the technology. And really, like they don't wake up thinking, oh my God, this is the best software in the world. They actually don't care about, of course, we sell software. So we're going to say that they love the software. But so then I'm like, I was always working very closely with sales in the field. I was always excited about the deals and the process of engaging the customers in the deals. So it was natural for me to kind of move into sales. And because I knew the buyer, I could hold really good conversations because I knew the buyers very well. I knew their pain, and I was not afraid to really talk about how that really could help their lives and why would that make the difference in their operating frameworks, et cetera, et cetera. And that made me a very successful seller. Like I went President Club a bunch of times. So it was a lot of fun. And I also think once you have a quota and you live or die by a quota, that really changes you. And a lot of marketers will say, yeah, we love sales. We respect sales. If you had a quota, it hits you in a different way. So then when I was a successful seller, one SVP that was leading a region came to me and said, do you know why you're a successful seller? And I'm like, well, I love what I do. And he's like, yeah, that plus you are doing marketing. without
Mm.
realizing that you're doing marketing. Because you're orchestrating the events, you're orchestrating how do you touch them with content. You're helping us making sure that we're touching the buyer in the right way. So you're kind of acting as our marketing in region expert and helping marketing orchestrate that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I think that's interesting.
See that? Yeah.
And then that slowly became an opportunity to start in marketing. And I actually never looked back. It's been the thing in my life that I actually said, this is it. I love this.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, because I bet if you're a successful technical salesperson, you are value selling at its finest, right? You
Yeah,
are not, I mean, I even catch myself when I do like marketer to marketer calls. I'm like, after, like, I'm just talking off the cuff about, about the product, about the company, about the value prop, about benefits, whatever. But I'm not looking at material. I'm just talking. And then should I record that? I should have written that down because I just wrote like our messaging and why didn't I do
exactly.
that? Because you catch yourself saying in front of customers what marketing should be selling. So I'm sure you brought it back not only to appreciate the value of pipeline because of your appreciation for quota, but also probably much elevated perspective on product marketing and product messaging because you know what hits or what's going to resonate with an end customer.
And I think especially in markets like ours that are ultra commoditized, what really drives, because let's say the tech is even, and I will say that my tech is the best in the world and I will
Of
die
course.
by it. But we know that at a certain level, 80%, 70% of the things that customers really care are more commoditized. What really drives differentiation is that deeper understanding, is that kind of, not only who's my buyer, but the emotional layers, like how do they advance their careers? Why do they care? So a lot of those extra nuances, I think, are the ones that actually really help us.
Yeah, for sure. Sort of on that note, but also a little bit of a pivot as I think about your background. So one thing I love is you speak English, Spanish, and Brazilian Portuguese. Is that
That's
right?
why you get a little bit of my accent. Yes. So yeah, I was born in Brazil and I was raised in Brazil until college. And then I started kind of traveling, lived in different places, and then found my home in the US. It's been a little bit over, Jesus, I'm going to date myself, but I think 12 years at this point.
Okay.
So my mother tongue is Portuguese. When I started traveling, I learned Spanish. So, and of course, English. There was something that my mom would say. She's like, you can choose anything in your life, but there's a few things that I'm choosing for you, and you have no choice because you're my son, and it's my law, my house, my rules. It's like you're gonna learn languages and you're gonna learn music. Those are the non-negotiables for me, and I'm super grateful for her.
Yeah, those are signs of intelligence too. Isn't there some rule? I spent 6 months in Sao Paulo, Brazil
Yeah,
back in like, I don't know, the early 2000s. Some rule that if you know Portuguese, it's easy to learn Spanish, or if you know Spanish,
correct.
it's easy to learn Portuguese. It's
So
one way or the other.
So Portuguese has more, like when you think about the phonemes that we use as kind of components of a language, we have all the phonemes to speak Spanish. So it's easier for us to pronounce it. The other way around, they don't have all the phonemes. So it's harder for them
Gotcha.
to learn Spanish than for them to learn Portuguese, I should say, than for us to learn Spanish. But
That's
at the end
what's
of the day, I think we'll both survive. If we want to order a beer or, something, we'll be fine.
Yeah, I knew enough to kind of like
I
order,
didn't know
usually
that. So
just,
next call we're gonna do in Portuguese. Next
we're
time
gonna
we
do
meet, we're gonna do the first 5 seconds or the first 5 minutes in Portuguese.
as long as all I have to say is hello, thank you, goodbye, and if I could order some water without gas or ice, then I think we should be in good shape. That's literally the
Okay,
extent of my
I'll take that.
Brazilian Portuguese. Awesome. So other ways, so going through, so sales, I think like boots on the ground learning to me is the best, right? Sales, CX, all of those things. It's going to make you a great marketer. You also went back and actually did like marketing training, like a CMO type program at Northwestern. Like how does formal training stack up against like sort of real life training in terms of making you a great CMO?
I think it's a good question. I like having as a percentage of academic knowledge. I'm not your 80% academic person, but I think
Mhm.
when you, and especially that course of not Northwestern. I'm not going to do the free advertisement for them if I don't get any, discount on the next one. But I think the caliber of the professors and the access to the operating frameworks and to the ideas, and
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of Jim Stengel on his marketing purpose trajectory. So he was one of the professors. I think there's a lot of good insights that you get, but you also get a lot of peer connections that you can actually go and say, I'm seeing this. Have you seen this? I think that's very interesting. But coming back with a better understanding of how to put things together as a CMO, I think it's really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I feel like I can run the business okay. I can think through, I can ask the right questions, but sometimes articulating with like frameworks to communicate that outside of marketing is where the academic part to me really helps. Like, okay, how do I take this whole story that I could rattle off in my sleep, but put it in a way that's consumable and actually links all the different pieces like brand or content or messaging with the performance driving
Yes.
channels and together to actually tell sort of almost a singular revenue acceleration story. It can be complex. How do you think about brand and those kind of things relative to revenue or pipeline or some of our performance drivers?
So I think on that's actually a huge question. I think on I'll give you one angle on the training that's important to me, and then we'll dive on the kind of the always on fundamental mythical question of marketing. I think the big one for me is, remember, English is not my first language. Although I speak, I could say like good enough. The
Yeah.
more I can learn the verbatim and expand that academic knowledge, it helps me also understand and speak in a more meaningful way. So there's also that extra angle that I really appreciate. Sometimes if you're in a boardroom, you got to elevate your lingo and all of those things. So I think the academic world really helps on those. I think going back to your specific question, when you sit in this chair, like when you're coming from under the tracks of marketing, you see the conflict in a much more meaningful way. You see
Yeah.
the man saying, take the budget away from brand saying, no, that's really what matters. I think and I come from the growth side of the house. So the more you spend time as a CMO, the more you learn to respect that what really matters is the brand, which is what puts all of that together. But you also
Mhm.
learn that everything is the brand. Now, which most people don't understand. They think when they put a campaign out, oh, that's not brand. Brand is just when I do awareness. No, no. Every stimulation that you do or every stimuli out there is part of your
Mhm.
brand. So I think learning to orchestrate those touches and making all of them meaningful, I think that's to me the biggest challenge for us, but also what really drives growth at the end of the day. So I think that's an evolving question. For us, it's really hard because we're a turnaround business in terms of expanding into different categories. So how do you have the budget to touch all of that, to build a brand
Yeah.
as you're driving growth? I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's, and I'm sure it varies by business, but I had this question yesterday. It was somebody asked me if I was supportive of an org model where marketing, like the CMO and the head of sales, whatever, both reported into a single CRO, like that kind of a structure. They owned all of go to market across marketing and sales. And my feeling on that is depending on where the background of that leader comes from, but often if it comes from the sales side, you almost index towards revenue generating things.
Yes.
And what happens is the brand sort of becomes less important, focusing on its messaging, its positioning, its brand awareness, top of funnel type things. And then what ends up happening is, yes, for a short bit of time, you can fuel the growth engine, but then you sort of dry up the top and then you run out of, and the funnel becomes empty very quickly. And so I think, so it's really interesting to think about how do you balance those two things? Because ultimately they all do drive to revenue and
Yes.
they make every single step work harder along the way. And hopefully you get more at bats when you get the brand right than you can down. But it's such an interesting trade-off constantly of where do we place our bets?
Also, I think the way I see it, they have different halo multipliers over time.
Mm.
So you can get a shorter
Oh, I like
multiplier
that.
if you go shorter term. But when you invest in things that, of course, shorter term, they will have less impact, but their multiplier effect over time is much longer. And it's a little bit about my challenge as well, being in a public company, because you got to manage Wall Street, which is extremely quarter short term, and you got to watch Main Street, which is how do you drive both, is a little bit of the same story of how do you build momentum by delivering to the short term, but also driving to a longer term strategy. And to me, that thinking of how can I get to that like multiplier for now, while making sure that if you think from a value creation perspective and that multiplier, the longer term of brand, I think is unbeatable.
Yeah, I agree. It almost comes down like the forcing function on it. And I ask this question a lot, like in community forums and things, is what's the elevated version of that is what do I tell the board this quarter, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys are reporting out earnings, you're public, you've got that kind of challenge. But really, because almost always the board is like, I want the numbers. I want the performance. Did we grow? Did we not? And you kind of want to talk about this great stuff or elevation of the messaging or new category positioning
Mm-hmm.
or new ways we're growing the market. But those things feel less important when you're sitting in front of a board because they really want to know about the numbers movement. So almost that forces you to say, okay, we're reporting out in this way, but inside the company, we're operating in a more balanced way because brand makes everything work harder. I've heard the phrase performance branding, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
actually a pretty great phrase, right? That talks about kind of everything we do is about performance, whether it's brand to demand, it's the full funnel.
One of the things that I've been trying to do on that angle is, first of all, one of the main decisions or the first decisions that I did here was to bring a platform that could help us measure real awareness. What's our familiarity per category versus our main competitors? What's our regard, meaning how highly do people regard our brand even before we're rebranded? So then we know what our brand numbers are. But when you sit down with the board, they're going to say, yeah, that's great. But hey, how is this converting to revenue at the end of the day? We built something that we call the brand index, which is a way to connect the top of the funnel from awareness, regard, and familiarity down funnel through account progression, through a lot of key indicators that calculate not only influence, but progression, conversion, and revenue all the way down. And I think, again, we're in that process, but I think that's an easier way for us to translate to say, longer term value is sliding into medium and short term value in this way. And these are the metrics. You put $1 here now and you invest it in the future. 18 months down the road, you get 20 cents and then 30 cents and then $1. I think that's kind of the thinking. How can we, as CMOs, transform some of that art into science and sit down with the board in a more numerical way? I am trying that, and I think in my experience so far, it's probably the best way. But there will always, especially if you're public, there will always be that.
Yeah.
Like the quarter is the quarter, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, offline, I'm going to pick your brain on those. I love this idea of this brand index and the different halo multipliers over time. I think that's pretty fascinating because you're right. It does change over time. It is on a different scale, right? Our pipeline initiatives are kind of real time fast. Brand's going to be a longer game. So I like the idea. So we'll dig into that more. Flipping back to, I know we talked about at the beginning about your history on sort of sales and coming from that, but the customer side. So starting as like a customer, I think one of the things we struggle with the most is I would say customer marketing. So people that are already in our space, that are already using our products, let's say, but also hitting pain points or use cases that are really, really relevant to make sure that they're hearing it. Like sometimes they feel a little bit surface level or they sound like marketing. Yeah, of course I want to drive revenue. Like what else would I be doing? Like whatever the key message is. But what does it mean, do you think, to actually using your customer experience? How can we get to truly deeply understanding our customers and changing the way that we think about the way we message versus kind of just surface level, high level benefit statements and that kind of thing?
I'm a little bit of a radical person. For those that work with me, they know I am very focused into driving customer perspective. Because for me, I feel it because I've been on the other side. So when I see, I'm like, "Ugh," so I usually have crazy reactions. I'll put two things for us to discuss. One is how fast can you pivot a culture to get into that? So think about us. We went from being a unified communications company that was more on video collab and dial tone and telephony into a customer experience company that it's all about outcomes and operating frameworks for companies. So how can you change not only your messaging, but sales, and how do you move all of that over time? I think is one question. But I think and as a CMO, you got to be careful, because if you flip it all the way to say, now it's all about use cases, you're going to lose your sales force along the way. They're going
Yep.
to say, I can't be
It's too
enabled in
much.
20 billion things. Exactly. A lot of companies, when you sit down there, they're going to say, this is my ICP, this is my customer. But if you look at the profile and you read it, it's really high level stuff. And it's still great stuff. Like, I'm not criticizing, but it's usually the very highest level of pain. Let me give you an example. If I were to sit down here with you, you would say, Bruno, are you trying to maximize your marketing ROI? I would say, hell yeah.
Of
But
course. Yeah.
but is that my pain point? Probably at a 1% high level, yes. So I think the first thing that I challenge is, are we really talking to customers? Like, I personally love talking to them because it brings me back to my CX consultant
Yeah.
days and understanding them from them. Like, how much do you care about technology? What's the role that this tech is playing into your operating framework? Like, when you wake up and you're like driving to work, what are you thinking about? When you
Yeah.
sit down with your boss, what is he asking you? When you're reporting on your quarter, how do you report it? So I think the more you explore how their lives are and what really makes them tick. And I know it may sound very cliche when I say this, but I haven't been in a company until like I had privilege of sitting in the CMO chair that we could say, yeah, we really have that extra level of detail. And
Yeah.
then once you have it, how do you scale and build a practice that you're going to keep digging and you're going to keep finding? I think that's the really interesting question.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been working on new messaging and positioning lately and trying to almost go through like this 5 why exercise, right? Of
Mhm.
kind of like, okay, so you want to maximize your marketing ROI. Well, why? Because you
Yes.
want to make the most of your resources. Well, why? Because I want every dollar we spend to work as hard as possible. Because I want to be the growth engine for this company. But why? And you kind of back in all the way to finally, to your point, get to that root cause of
Mhm.
peeling back the layers until you figure out this is really the pain point. The pain point is that I don't know, like you want to make an impact in this company, or that you feel like your position is not taken seriously and you need to add, I think is really interesting. But that why exercise until you truly get to like that root thing, like this is the pain point. This is what we're trying to solve.
The other thing that I like, a question for you, at least in our space, there's a lot of the unsaid that's not part of the answer, the implied or
Mm,
intangible, that I think most of us never get to, because usually we do this in a structured form, meaning we go in a rational way and ask them, tell me about this. And we never get to that deeper layer of like, I buy this because it makes me feel safe. Or I
mm-hmm,
buy this because it makes me feel that I have a better chance of being promoted. And again, I'm riffing, but it's also about how are we accessing them in the right way. And you're not going to, sometimes those are nuances in your messaging, but
mm-hmm.
those could be nuances that drive a lot of differentiation. So I've been spending a lot of time also with our teams on how are we putting the buyers in a way that we can harness the implied things and the unsaid sometimes. And things that we find are kind of scary / fascinating, like really fascinating.
Well, and as you talked about, like then figuring out how to translate that into sales enablement, right? To actually get your sellers, like getting that discovery, that's a complex discovery, right? To go
Yes.
through with prospects and to think about, okay, we position like this. What are the discovery questions we need to ask that an SC down to the right level to know when to match this use case with this answer to this discovery question? And it gets complex because they're doing that for maybe at the platform level, maybe at every point solution that you have, whatever it is you're selling or a service that you're offering, whatever it is. And they're having to sort of do this match exercise between what is the pain point, what is the discovery question, what is the use case we can solve, what product goes with that, and then what are the next steps. And and we realize just like, and again, your point of view coming from someone who's worked in sales has an appreciation for that. But we manage the SDRs here on the marketing team. I'm constantly thinking like, what can what can Will from the SDR team like translate from this? What can Sam from the SDR team translate from this? How do I make this as easy as possible, but still get to the root cause, especially when they're getting 5 minutes with a decision maker potentially on the phone?
So fun, interesting fact. One of the things that we do with our platform is analyze communications from multiple sources, right? So the SDRs are also with me in
Mm-hmm.
marketing. We've analyzed as we closed last quarter. We're in a quiet period, so I'm not going to say anything about the financials. But one of the things
Sure.
that we've analyzed, all the conversations that our SDRs had with prospect before discovery, and we threw all of that into AI and said, what are the main themes said, unsaid, implied, unimplied, and did a spider web of things to see, is our messaging going in the right direction? How are they feeling about it? They're like, yeah, this is good. Yeah, this is bad. So I think now we also have the capabilities to do those things at scale and
Mm-hmm.
access and harness thousands of conversations that if we were doing focus groups or if you and I
Take
and our
months.
teams were interviewing buyers, we would probably never get to that.
Yeah. I mean, you take some of those gong recordings or whatever it is, and with AI, I mean, we use, I think, a product called Momentum that takes all of the gong insights and spits out summaries and that kind of thing. It's driving AI, driving,
Yes.
implications for us, which is great. So I guess that's a easy question for you and a relevant question for you. How's AI changing your world? Like, where are you thinking about it in the world of?
Yeah. So we've rebranded last November. If we didn't have such an advanced internal AI strategy from a content creation, from we even did AI photo shoots because we didn't want to spend the money on real photos at the end of the
Oh,
day.
love
So
it.
so I think if we didn't have a lot of the capabilities on AI back then, and when I say AI, I mean content creation, all of the messaging, voice and tone, and all of those
Mm-hmm.
things, we wouldn't have been able to rebrand with the budget we had at that time because we decided to slice it over a couple quarters. I think that's one angle on how can that be a superpower for messaging. And when I say a superpower, is the connection between brand messaging, PMM messaging, and demand gen messaging all at once. So we build, I call it the CMO command center, which is an
Mm.
agent that has access to all of our research along the way, that all of my organization, they joke it's kind of my digital twin. So they
Uh-huh.
use that to calibrate messaging. They use that to write emails. They use that to say, hey, we're building this project. What would be the first step of our check-in? So I think having that ability early on allowed us to be much faster. Now, that's one angle of it. I think the other angle is because we have access to our own technology that records a lot of the things, using AI allowed us to harness more information and learn faster as a marketing
Yeah.
organization. The other thing is we're doing a lot of tests with AI nurturing. Like we have some custom flows that we built on lead. So we get a lead, we go and enrich that lead directly with AI, doing research with a cheap model.
Yep.
So a lot of those interesting research projects that sometimes are probably more advanced than some of the marketing automation tools. The
Yeah.
cost of a cheap AI framework, the tokens are on the micro cents of a dollar. So
Yeah.
so I'm excited about the opportunity. I think it's going to change how marketing, especially the org design and how we do business in the near future. So I don't know about that, but so far I think it's been a superpower.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. I think every day we're getting better and better at tapping into the potential, not for the purpose of like, cutting headcount, but for the purpose of accelerating, research analysis,
Mhm.
next best actions on what to do with projects or what to do with customers and building it into our product and our go-to-market motion, automating workflows around that and augmenting data, contact data, as you talked about. Yeah, there's just been so much rich. And yeah, if you can tap into, I always joke that AI to me is only as good as the data that feeds it.
Yes.
And so when you think about like your CMO command center is essentially we have a platform that's just fed. Of course, it's got the web in it, but it's fed by all of our proprietary docs, right? Our messaging and our positioning and our pricing and our brand voice and tone and all those things. And then it actually speaks and generates relevant content based on your own proprietary things. And I think that's when you can tap in, generic chat GPT, but you're actually Bruno's voice, 8x8's
Yes.
voice, all captured
Yes.
in really relevant and differentiated messaging. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens over the next few years with that.
I'm super excited. And I think for us, it also gives us the ability to have a thought partner. You know, I use the meta glasses sometimes and I go walk my dog talking with GPT on things that I have to work with and sounding ideas and things like that. So I think it for CMOs, it gives us access to have a sounding partner, especially if you use some of the more modern kind of progressive thinking models. But I think for the organizations, I think it will change dramatically business as we know it now. We'll see. Let's park that question for the next sessions.
Yeah, we'll do another follow up on Brazilian Portuguese and future of AI. One quick question, total sidebar. What kind of dog do you have?
I have a golden doodle. Let me show you. Rudy, come here. He's leaping down the couch, but let me show. Rudy, come here. Come, baby. Come. Oh, and he's heavy. So,
He must be like
oh,
a stand-up. Oh, wow. Hey, Rudy.
he's a medium. You can see he was sleeping, but he's 40 pounds, 4.5 years. He's my office bud when I'm in town.
Yeah. Another reason why being on the road 4 or 5 weeks, I feel like my dog was like getting depressed because he was like, I'm home
Yes.
alone again. Every day I'm home alone again. Yeah, I have a little, we like smush face dogs in our house. So we have a Boston Terrier.
Oh,
He's
nice.
getting older. Yeah. Yeah. He's great. But yeah, he just sleeps right here at my feet all the time.
That's
So
what
it's great.
Rudy's doing. Yeah.
Keeps us company. I think they like having someone nearby. So
Yes.
all right. Okay. Last meaty question, and then we'll transition a bit to be more fun. So, benefit of hindsight, you're now in the CMO role. Is there something you wish you had known, or some bit of advice you would have given your sort of younger self that would have made being a CMO or being in this position now easier, better, faster, looking back?
I love this question. And I think even to me, thinking about this question sparked a lot of newer connections and things that I had thought. So I think my biggest advice is I told at the beginning that I zigzagged a lot in my career. And I was afraid earlier on that that would be a problem. And everyone was telling me that I was sacrificing by it, that I was potentially losing more than I was going to win. But I was chasing my passion. So I've always followed I'm a very curious person. So
Mm-hmm.
I was following my gut. But I think the advice is don't be afraid of zigzagging around. As long as you do that, you're able to connect the dots.
Mm,
Because that zigzagging at the end of the runway or later down the road might actually be your edge.
yeah.
But I never thought that way until I sat on the kind of the more senior marketing functions where that perspective was really important.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I feel like now I see that, right? I see that value. I
Yes.
see when I hire people, I love when they have sort of a diverse background. Or I love hiring marketers that worked in sales, or I love hiring people that come from sort of different spaces, different industries. They bring a different perspective. When I was coming along, I sort of had this opposite mindset, right? Which was like, I'm,
Same
and I
here.
think a lot of folks, like, they sort of think like, and now that I've learned the functional hard skill, I should get promoted to the next level and I should learn that
Yes.
functional hard skill and move along. And what you realize is a couple things. One is those hard skills are so much easier to learn than the softer skills that take a lot more time. And so you can rush along the hard skill learning, but the softer skills, which come from zigging and zagging, which come from working in different parts of the organization, which come from working on different functions, whether the more the art side or the science side of marketing, then you get a very different perspective and you learn. And then and you work with different bosses and different managers and different leadership styles, different cultures. And you realize, like, man, I'm building my full toolkit to be a great leader, not just a really good digital marketer, for example.
I agree 100%. It's almost like instead of building a part of yourself, you're building yourself.
Yeah,
It's a
that's a
little
really
bit
good way to
more of
think
a
about it.
wider kind of perspective, right? So, and I know at the highest level, it seems very simple, but I think it can be a big differentiator. So I think
Yeah.
if I were to look back, I would say, just go, Bruno, enjoy the ride.
Yeah. Well, I was an engineer out of college. And so I was like, and I knew that I probably wasn't going to be an engineer. I didn't know exactly what I'd going to be, but I still always had this sort of like next step mentality of
Mhm.
like, well, I'm going to, work in a manufacturing plant, and then I'm going to work in the consulting or whatever it was. But there was always sort of a plan. And I didn't know anything different. I went to Texas A&M, engineering degree, like very black and white. My son just committed to play football at Princeton for college.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And at first it was kind of uncomfortable because surprisingly, like the Ivy Leagues, not some of them do, but in general don't have a business school. They
Hmm.
don't have like a very clear track. They're these kind of open curriculum things. And at first I was like, well, what's he going to major in? Like what, like economics, psychology,
Hmm.
like what is this? And those didn't feel tangible to me. Because I was like, well, you have to like pick something tangible and it's kind of a path. And what I've
Hmm.
learned is the value, or I'm planning to learn through all the conversations we've had with the school and the coaches, is just the value of being wide open to learning so many different things that you can actually figure out what you like, or you figure out a way to piece all those things together, and they actually make you much more well-rounded than just being an expert in that one thing.
Yes.
And so I'm sort of fascinated. I've got my whole mind, like I was like, liberal arts school, I don't understand. Like you go to engineering school, whatever. And the more I learn about it, the more I think, man, he's going to be more curious, as you talked about, more like kind of intuitive, more balanced, like kind of like your mom forcing you to do music and languages. What it did
Hmm.
is it taught you to appreciate a different side of your brain and a different side of your thinking. Just think it's just fascinating. Anyway, I know I just went off on a tangent, but I'm just like
No,
learning this
I
idea of
love
like learning.
I love that. And if you add on top of that, that the more we advance AI, the more it will be easier to get the specific knowledge. What really
Mm-hmm.
matters on top of that is how he's building that character into accessing the knowledge, into like all of those other things that will make him like curious to move on. And also I wonder about a lot of this question. I don't want to go deep in that end, but like if you think about a world where knowledge is not the most important thing anymore because it's easily accessible,
Yeah,
what is the human traits that are actually important, right? If you
yeah,
think about it, he's actually going to get more of that human angle than
yeah.
this specific knowledge, which he can access later. So I think it's an interesting move.
Yeah. Well, and it's, yeah, I mean, we had this conversation in our offsite last week. A lot of those same things like, okay, what is AI functionally replacing? And then what is our, as humans, what is our differentiation? And what
Hmm.
is that layer? And to your point, it's a lot of those things. I don't think we figured it all out yet, but that human thinking, the strategic angle of things and being able to like put a lot of that knowledge together into a direction, understanding buyers, softer skills, leadership, like all of those things become more and more important in this era. So I'm fascinated about the next 10 years, see where we go. So
Same here. Buckle
yeah,
up.
that's right. That's right. All right, before we wrap, fun fact. Anything interesting about Bruno that we have not covered?
I think there's one that when I look back into my personal self and my career, it's an interesting point that changed everything. So when I was at college, like you, I went into a kind of a computer science business type of college. So, and I was like, not sure this is a little like too scientific for me. So I went to Disney to work for Disney as a cast member. So I did their international college
Mm-hmm.
program and lived in Florida for a couple months. And and I was not goofy in a costume or anything, but I worked at the parks, and I think that point in my career was life changing on the fact of looking at people, and understanding the connection between experiences and businesses. And that's why I ended up going to the customer experience side later down the road. But I think it's a fun fact because Disney was amazing and it sparked a lot of that creativity. It
Mm-hmm.
was also something not very natural that I was like, I worked for Disney, and I have a photo there with me on a costume and things like that. I'll show you on one of our next
I
conversations, but
love.
I think it's kind of a fun one.
Oh, I love it. And it goes right into what we just talked about. Like diversity of experiences makes you so much, you have a different appreciation for customers, different appreciation for intangible ways you can affect them, versus just straight hard facts or ROI or whatever it is. So that's very cool. And I've heard crazy things about the Disney summers. And so
I've
that's
seen
another
some of
topic for
those.
offline sometime. Awesome. Well, Bruno, if people wanted to get in touch with you, is what's the best way? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is the best way. My only humble ask, put on the note, say, hey, I saw your podcast. I'd love to connect with you because I get a
So
billion
many.
people just hitting me with stuff that I don't know. And then I end
Yeah.
up not accepting because I don't know. So I'd be happy to connect and be of service. Just let me know you heard a podcast.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, we appreciate that. Thanks so much for coming today. I love the conversation as always.
Thanks for having me. My privilege. Thanks, Callie.
Awesome, of course. And thank you everyone for listening. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.